All right, we are back again. We are going to mix a glaze today. This is Rick. He's delightful. He is kind enough to show us how to mix a glaze. He has lots of supplies here. And take us away, Rick. Show us what to do.
So for glazes, when you are mixing the glaze, you should be looking for what team you're on and just monitoring the glaze under the table on where the level of that glaze is. If it starts to run out, you gotta contact your team to come in and set up the glaze and make one.
Or if you're using a glaze that runs out, contact whoever's in charge of that glaze.
Yes. So glaze teams are up on the wall here. We set them out a little late, but those are the glaze teams for 2022. And those are your teams. The person on blue at the top of there is a skilled person that does know how to mix glazes. So if you do need assistance, ask that person to help you out, or you can email me, and if I'm free, I'll come in and help as well.
And if you're a new member, you shouldn't attempt this alone for your first try.
No, children, do not do this at home. When mixing glazes, safety is one of the most important things that you have to take into consideration. We'll be dealing with a lot of chemicals that are in dry powder form, and with that, it can create plumes of dust that come up into the air. Some of these chemicals are extremely toxic while they're in dry form and basically powder in the air. So we have to be cautious how we handle this. We all use a respirator that has inserts on the side that are P100 or higher. You cannot go lower than that, or it's not going to filter out the particles for that. Keep your respirator, when you do get one, in a Ziploc bag, because as I said, this room does get very dusty, and the last thing you want to do is put your mouth on here and take a deep breath when it's dusty. The respirator, there is instructions on the package on using it, but basically it just goes over your head, tight, and then around. And when you breathe, you should be breathing through these. There should be no air coming between here.
You sound like Darth Vader.
So there are two lists in here. One of the lists is a list of all the chemicals, and they're numbered that correspond with every container here. The next list beside it is if you find out that we've run out or you've used the last of it, mark it on this list, and that is our shopping list. All the chemicals, starting with number 1, are under here. So we have our Gursely borat, and wollastonite, EPK, soda feldspar, talc, ball clay, bentonite, and so on and so on. In the glaze room in the back corner, all of the colorants are here. And again, these ones are where we get a little more toxic than the other ones, and just careful handling them and refilling them.
So now we are going to actually mix a glaze.
Okay, so all of our glaze recipes, and they actually are called recipes, are in these books, or in this book. And today we are going to mix floating blue because that's Erin's, and she's suckering me into it. The glaze recipes do come in usually a percentage, and that percentage represents how many grams that you're going to make. 10,000 grams generally is a bucket about this size and might be a little bit more. It's not common for us to make the 10,000 because usually there'll be a bit of glaze left in there. So we'll usually make about 5,000 if we're wanting to make just more than half a bucket. Today we're probably going to do less than that because the current floating blue has half a bucket in there, and we don't want to make more than what fits in that bucket. So to reduce our size, we'll end up taking 41% of our 5,000, so cutting it back.
Ooh, look at that!
I did it earlier. So we end up cutting it back, so we're going to do half of the 5,000. So really we're just going to take our 2,050 and drop it down to 1,025, and so on with all the ingredients.
So these are all in what measurement? These are grams?
These are all in grams.
Okay.
It's written there. You'll notice it says 5,000 there and 5,000 there. This will equal 5,000. Our colorants that we will add into this at the end, again, they're toxic. Will be 4% of 5,000 and 2% of 5,000, and then 0.015 of 5,000 as well. So if you need help with math, Google it.
So Rick is just gathering up some supplies that we're going to need to mix the glaze. Buckets are super fun to pull apart. Make sure you're picking a clean one. Nothing worse than a dirty bucket. You will need this guy. He lives up there hanging next to the window. You will need this guy. He lives up there on that shelf. This is the scale. And we love our Tupperware. It lives in Tupperware. Everybody's favorite mixing bowl. This is fun. It's like baking.
Okay, so for supplies that we're gonna need, we need our scale with measuring, and we need our sieve. Which they're up there. And you'll want 2 buckets because we will transfer the glaze repeatedly back and forth as we sieve it. And then we also have our viscosity cup that we'll use to measure the time. At the end, we'll also need a test tile, which will demonstrate that.
Where do you find those?
They're down over by the thing that says test tiles.
Oh, there's a box under there.
Yeah.
Oh, right there.
And then also write out all your ingredients so we can strike it out after every time we add it in.
Yes.
So you'll need a pen.
All right, go.
Okay. Before you get started on all of your stuff, please make sure everything is clean. Every bucket should be clean that you work with. The sieve should be clean, so take a look and check under here and inside the brushes. The reason for this is we do not want to contaminate any colorants with this glaze.
So this one here is not clean.
Not too clean. I'd clean it. There's still bits on here, especially if you're doing something like clear. The tiniest amount of colorant in it might set off the color, and you're gonna have to explain that to the rest of the members.
Yep.
And buckets need to be clean as well. I can see there's floating blue or some kind of colorant on here. So if I was doing clear, I would probably stay away from this. With the floating blue, I feel confident with this, but I am probably going to watch this thing just a little bit more because the last person that used it didn't do a good job.
Okay, go.
So to start mixing the glazes, I do fill this bucket up with a little bit of water so that it makes it easier to mix at the end. This glaze, because we're only doing 2,500 grams, we'll only use about 15 cups of water. So keep in mind that it's easy to add water, it's hard to take water out. So use as less water as possible until you have it all mixed up, and then we'll start adding water gradually until we get to the right viscosity.
Why do you start with water in it?
Because if it's powder at the bottom, you're never going to get that off when you start mixing it.
Okay, so dry into wet.
Okay, so starting to mix our chemicals, it's usually easier to pull them all out near to where you're mixing, just so that you're not dropping it all over the floor. Makes it a lot harder to clean up after, which we will show you cleaning later. The scale, put the scale out before you turn it on. Place your container on top, whatever you're going to be mixing or placing everything in to measure it, and then turn it on. This is zeroed off and it's counting the bowl, so whatever we add to this is going to be the right amount. Are you still recording?
Oh yeah,
Damn it.
let's do it.
Okay, so our first one, I'm not wearing a mask right now, I'm just doing it so I can talk on this, and this one is not toxic, but it still does create dust. Please make sure you're wearing your mask all the time. So the Nepline, we're going to end up making 1,025 that we're going to add to this bucket. So pretty much scoop out a little bit at a time, watch you're not dropping it all over the floor. That's 671. And we're going 1,025. So it says 1,025.5 there
Nope.
a second ago.
Dropped
It went
down.
back. That has to be exact. Don't round off, don't adjust, especially when you get to your colorants. 0.5 could completely change what this glaze looks like.
So now we are going to suit up in our masks, continue with the rest of the mixing until there's an important chemical that we need to talk about. Good, good?
So adding the colorants in here, this is a trick that I do, just mixing glazes so much. I don't want the colorants to stick to the container, so I'll usually end up putting a piece of newspaper on the container. I put that on there.
And this is a different container.
And it's just a little different, yeah. Just something to hold it. And then zero it off. And I'll add my colorants onto there and then dump them in. And then the paper can be tapped to get most of the colorants in.
Good. If there is a component to be careful of, it's this crap. This will get everywhere. So be as cautious as humanly possible when working with it. It's the red iron oxide. Super careful.
So now that we have all of our ingredients submerged underwater, the chances of dust has been reduced. So we waited a couple minutes, about 5-10 minutes after everything's been submerged, just to make sure all the dust has been reduced in the room. And then we can take our masks off from this point on and put on your COVID masks. Just remember, put your mask back into a Ziploc bag right away, just for storage so you don't get dust in it. Part is where we're gonna mix the glaze. This mix is just the first mix that we're gonna do. And it's really to get all the parts as much together as we can before we start to sieve it. And sieving it'll break it down into tiny parts and basically make a uniform glaze.
What's that amazing tool you have there, Rick?
A drill.
What's on it though? Look at that!
So that's a drill, and you can see it's kind of chunky right now. It's just a paint mixer thing or some kind of mixing tool that we have. We'll also put a piece of newspaper on the side here so that we have a place to put it down. When you do mix with this, just watch it doesn't splash back up into your face or on the ceiling.
I think the ceiling's okay. So you've been mixing for a while. It's still thick, but it's smooth at least.
Mix it up to get most of the chunks out of it and everything. You're not going to get it perfect at this point. But right now, I really just want to skim the sides of it to get it all down to the bottom.
And that spatula lives above the sink?
Yes.
As does the measuring cup?
And at this point, gently, I just want to pour it in. Careful enough to splash, or you'll see you have to clean up later. And then try to get all of it. There's some chunks at the bottom here that are still floating around that we do have to remove. There should not be anything discarded, as if you discard any of this, it is going to change the color of the glaze, as you've lost colorants, or it could change how the glaze works on your piece, which makes members not happy. Remember when adding water that less is better, because we can always add water later. We can't take it out easily. If you do end up adding more water than you should, you're going to have to let the glaze sit and let it evaporate naturally to get the water out, which could take a week or two, and then put everybody behind on glazes. Next, just gently turn it, and the sieve will work its magic and start separating. You may see clumps in here still, and that's normal. And we are going to probably be putting this through about 4 or 5 times until every clump and everything is very consistent.
So Rick is around the corner, tirelessly sieving glaze back and forth. I'm trying to be a good person, so I'm cleaning up, and I have come to wash this guy here. Basically, just get it clean. There's sponges up above the sink here, right there. There's lots of scrubby brushes here. Don't use the clear or the white scrubby brushes for cleaning stuff that has lots of colorant in it. But scrub it, get it clean, get all the glaze off it, because this is going into something else next time. Just be a good human being and clean it as much as you can.
Okay, this is going on back and forth 5 times
Woo!
until I feel comfortable. If you look at the glaze right now, it's very consistent and it's mixed. There's no chunks of color.
Even in here, I can see that it's nice.
And even within here, as you see, the glaze is everywhere on the side here. We want to clean out as much as you can with also using as less water as possible. So I'm just going to use this, do a quick splash. Glaze mixed.
Bum, ba, da, da. Okay, you're on.
Okay, the next part is measuring the glaze to ensure we have the right amount of water to the ingredients that are in there. And that's where we use the viscosity cup. Viscosity cup will be inside this bag and it's up on the shelf over there. On every ingredient or recipe, I've actually written down the general how much time it's going to take for the fluid to pass through this viscosity cup. So for this one, it's 18 seconds. Usually it'll say student beside there because I'm consistent in how I make those student glazes. So for the viscosity cup, just open my phone, I got my timer right here.
And it's the cool timer.
And I'm going to give it a quick stir. We submerge the viscosity cup just so the whole thing is level to there. And then we are going to start the timer and lift it. And we're watching for 18 seconds. So it took longer than 18 seconds, so that tells me that it is a lot thicker than it needs to be. So we're going to add a little bit of water into it, and we're going to add small amounts at a time, and then continue. So about half a cup for the amount that I have here, and then we'll try it again.
Rick only had to add water once to get it perfect because he's a show-off.
Oh, no, I've done it a couple. Sometimes it takes more. So just going to clean up the bucket because this glaze is going to sit in this bucket for quite a while now. Don't need to do anything in there. We have our test tile. We're going to take our test tile and we're going to dip it in the glaze once for a second, just like you would with a pot. And then we're going to let that dry before we dip it again.
And then when you dip it a second time, how far do you go?
We're only going to go halfway down on the second time.
Okay. So it's like 3 seconds for the first dip and another 3 for the second dip?
Similar like what you do with a pot.
Okay.
So that looks like it's dry. I'm going to dip it only halfway this time. And then we'll let that dry as well. This test tile is now going to tell us what this glaze is. We will put the glaze away and we'll put a lid on it and we'll mark it and we'll put our information on top of the lid down here. There's some examples over there. And we're going to leave this test tile right here where it says to be fired. And the next member that comes in that is going to be firing a glaze will collect those and they'll put them in with their glaze.
If they're good people, they'll collect those and they'll...
If you're firing a glaze and you see test tiles there waiting to go, please
be
put
good
them in your
people.
can.
Yes. Are there brown test tiles as well right now?
There's a few different colors. I don't know who made these because those aren't going to work. But there is brown ones. and there's white ones. Another thing too with them is on the bottom of it, we're actually going to write the type of glaze. So we did floating blue today, so it says F blue under there. And we use the Amico pencil. And this Amico pencil won't burn off in the kiln, it'll stay there. For example, these people did it.
This is a poor example. Hang on. Here's an example. Here's an example on the robin's egg. Somebody's written it on there. And they did one of each. So Rick was saying on the top of the bucket, you have to fill out your information, like what they've done on this one. So these papers that you write them on, they live up here on the bulletin board that generally just holds everything that's important. When in doubt, check this bulletin board. So he's just writing out floating blue. Rick made it under Aaron's supervision. November 8th. Test tiles ready, and then we tape that to the top of this bucket. Once these test tiles are fired, we check off on here. Test tiles fired, and then we mix the glazes together. Go.
Okay, so once your test tile comes out of the kiln, take a look at it and just make sure it's okay, that there's nothing, that it hasn't run too much or that there's problems with the glaze. It should have its proper shine. You can take the test tile and you can check on ours and just take a look to see, does it actually match in color?
Oh God, a mop fill.
And the colors do match, so I'm pretty comfortable with this glaze if we were to mix the two of them together. If there was a big problem that your glaze matched like that,
maybe don't mix those buckets.
Don't mix them together, and contact me if your glaze doesn't look like the way it's supposed to be.
Perfect. All right, it's cleaning time. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, I can take those bowls out of there. They're clean. I washed them already. Thank you. Okay, I'm back.
Okay, so cleaning the sieve is really important that you do it properly. Don't cut the corners on this, because the next person's just going to have to clean it if it's not properly cleaned.
Like what we did.
So lift up the arm, and then these just slide out, and you'll see there's glaze mixed in there, so that's why we're sliding them out. All three of them will come out. Tip it and push up on the bottom, and the sieve will actually come out. And all of these pieces can be cleaned independently. Just make sure you clean the actual whole entire thing. Okay, so it's all clean. There is no glaze left on any of the pieces. We'll just end up assembling it, and we hang it back up on by the window to dry on there.
Ta-da!
From this point, oh.
No, you're good.
Okay, so from this point, we're just going to clean up the buckets, clean the whole entire table, just like the members' room. Everything has to be cleaned and put back exactly where it was. This glaze took us, for filming and everything, it took us 1 hour and 5 minutes to make that one glaze. Once you get comfortable making glazes, generally it takes about half an hour to 45 minutes to plan from start to cleaning and getting out of here and back to making your powder.
So all the containers are washed, they're put away, the buckets are stacked, the sink is wiped, and now Rick is wiping the table again. A good rule of thumb for this room, wipe the table, let it dry, and then look at it. And you probably have to wipe it again because stuff hides.
I rinse my sponge a lot.
It's terrible. You end up with like big swirly glaze marks. Same goes for the sink. So this sink is not a real fast draining sink. So we've wiped this more than once and there's still a bunch of gunk in there. So we're gonna have to really do a good job of cleaning that out before we leave too, because nobody wants to walk in and have a sink full of gross stuff. Look at that clean table. I'm just gonna circle back to the very beginning because we were moving very quickly. This list that has all the ingredients on it, there's numbers all the way down the side here. And I feel like we talked about it, but it was fast because Rick is so fast. The storage containers, they're all numbered. There's a number above, and then there's a number on the container with the name of the chemical that's in that container. So they start here at 1, they go around the room counting up. That corner, it gets a little bit messy numerically. But trust me, they're all there. So like 11. This is how you find your stuff. So don't freak out and feel like you have to run through and read every single thing, because you don't. You just have to find the number that you need and then search out that number. And of course, mopping up a storm, because glazing be messy. Oh, and the water sings too. You hear that lovely squeal? That's our tap. It's good fun.
All the glazes here that we have under the table are standard. We don't make any others or different glazes than what we have here. To introduce a new glaze, it does have to be discussed amongst all the members and voted in. There is a lot of glazes that are here for us to share. If for some reason you want to test out a glaze that you found online or something like that, don't make a big bucket of it, make a very small container of it. And just remember, these chemicals are expensive and we're all paying for them, so please respect that. Thanks.